please join me in welcoming Gov Hutchinson. Gov is the Assistant General Counsel of the California Association of Realtors. He's been with C.A.R. since 1985, and almost as long as I can remember, he's been with C.A.R. And he manages C.A.R.'s Member Legal Services Program from Los Angeles. Gov has joined us in this program repeatedly over the years, and we're grateful for all he does to educate us on the laws impacting our industry. Notice I said we're grateful for him educating us. We're certainly not grateful for most of these laws that we have to live with. As a reminder, please hold up your question cards and our staff will pick them up and bring them up here and write some really good ones, because I'm interested in knowing what you have on your mind, and I know Gov's interested in answering those questions. So without further ado, Gov Hutchinson. Thanks, Gov.
All right. Hi, everybody. I really apologize that I'm not there in person. I want to be there in person. It's certainly not your association's fault. It's C.A.R., where I work for, basically imposed sort of a travel ban on people like me. We can't go anywhere until probably at least end of February. So I really wish I were there. I'm not there, but you can always reach me anytime you want. Any one of you can email me anytime you want. govh@car.org. Call me. I'd be glad to talk to you. So we're going to do a legal update. How many laws do you think the governor signed this year? 836. How many of them are relevant to real estate? We came up with about 29. We have a handout you can get on our website, 2022 new laws, that summarizes them. I think in front of you, you have some type of technology where you can actually look at them as I'm talking if you want to. I'm not going to talk about all 29. I'm just going to talk about a handful, 10 or 15. I'm actually going to emphasize one that's really important, and that's SB 9, which you might have questions on that. Actually, what you've been dealing with the last couple of years is, a lot of stuff on COVID and a lot of stuff on landlord-tenant rules. And other than that, there really is not a lot of new stuff that really impacts your daily life, which is good, I think. It's hard enough to keep up with rental stuff and COVID stuff, right? There are a couple of things real quick before I get into the items that are in the actual handout. Number one is there's a late breaking thing you might not have noticed, but there's a new law effective this year that says when you're renting out residential property, you have to provide this mold booklet to your tenants. It is only for new tenants, not your ongoing tenants. But if you have a new tenant starting after January 1st, you need to incorporate into your rental form this mold booklet. If you use the C.A.R. form, if you use the C.A.R. lease form, it's automatic, it's attached. But if any of you are renting out residential property and you're not using the C.A.R. rental form, please go on our website so you can get the mold booklet and then give it to your tenant, your new tenant. Okay, so that didn't even make it to our handout. Another thing real quick I just have to talk about, we can't avoid it, it's just the latest on COVID. I'll do this super quick. Remember, they extended until February 15th, the mask wearing ordinance when you're in indoor public places. For realtors, that means open houses and showings. So you're still supposed to wear a mask, open houses and showings until at least February 15th, regardless of your vaccination status, okay? Then Cal OSHA has just updated the rules regarding offices. We still have to deal with a whole separate set of rules for offices, and the rule in the office is you're also supposed to be wearing a mask in your office unless you're alone or eating or drinking. So you're probably going to be doing a lot of eating and drinking. I'm just kidding. Anyway, the point is that's still in effect. We don't know how much longer that's going to be in effect. What if you're exempt from wearing a mask? Well, then you can be in the office without wearing a mask, but in that case, you have to social distance, and you either have to be fully vaccinated or you're supposed to test at least once a week. Okay, we'll see how long this lasts. Finally, if you're the office broker, and this is not just real estate, this is offices in all industries. If someone works in the office gets sick, you got to tell everyone else in the office within a day that someone got sick. The person who is sick, you got to send them home, and they can't come back for 10 days at least, and also make sure that their fever is over, and they have, at the end of 10 days, they can come back as long as they have no fever, and their other symptoms are improving, but make sure they still wear a mask for 14 days. I mean, including the 10 where they were gone, so 4 more days. Anyone in the office who was exposed had close contact with the person who was in the office when they were sick. If they're vaccinated, they can come back to work, but they should wear a mask in the office for 14 days. But remember, there's also a whole separate rule that says right now everyone's supposed to wear a mask anyway, unless you're exempt. It's complicated stuff, but that's the latest. All right. And we can't do anything about it. This isn't going to last forever, but that's where we are right now. One last thing, if you run an office, you have to supply masks for your employees if they ask for one, not your independent contractors, not your realtors. Okay, enough on COVID, enough on mold. Let's talk about some of the new laws the governor just signed. Like I said, I think you have access at your table. I can't see you, unfortunately, to some QR code that help you do this. So just to make it a little easier, I'll sort of go in order on what you have. If you don't have to follow along on that, obviously, but just in case, I mean, I'm not going to start with SB 9, even though that's the most important one, but I'm going to get to it in order, and I'll spend more time on that. There are a couple things that affect realtors directly this year, not much. I already mentioned mold booklet. I already mentioned COVID. What else? There's under your handout under continuing education, implicit bias training, starting 2023. If you have to renew your license after January 1st, 2023, you'll find as part of your survey course that you have to take, there'll be an extra hour added to it with more training on fair housing and also what's called implicit bias. Going to teach us, we all have biases we're not even aware of, they're unconscious. Teach us how to recognize them and address them. You'll just notice that if you renew your license in 2022, it's not going to be any different. Renew your license in 2023, you'll see. Okay, no big deal there. There's going to be a new disclosure form. I know you think, I got enough disclosure forms. Right now, you know, we got the big ones, TDS and the lead paint and the SPQ and the NHD and the fire hardening. And then you got attached to your purchase contract, right? The fair housing form, the wire fraud advisory, the inspection advisory, the 2 agency forms, and the privacy notice. So there's disclosures, like 5 disclosures you do outside of your form, and then there's 6 of them attached to the form. Well, come July, there's going to be a 7th one attached to the form, which means you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do anything. If you're using the C.A.R. purchase contract, you will be providing your buyer with the new form. What is it going to be? It's called the appraisal discrimination notice. You're going to have to tell your clients, your buyer and seller, hey, you know, appraisers are not supposed to be biased. And if you think your appraisal came in low because the appraiser was biased, and you may have been reading about they're doing these sting operations on appraisers, and some of them are clearly biased. Anyway, the point is, this form is going to tell your clients if they think the appraisal came in low because of bias, the form is going to tell them how to file a complaint, okay? And in your handout, that's under disclosures. Nothing in your handout regarding disclosures. I would say, by the way, of all these laws that got passed this year, the 2 big categories of laws that affect you are laws that try to make it easier to build housing, and the other laws deal with like discrimination and fair housing. In your handout under disclosures, discriminatory restrictions, there's a new, you know what a deed restriction is? You buy a house and there's a deed restriction, and some of them are legal and some of them aren't. Sometimes it's an affordable housing deed restriction. Sometimes this house can only be used for religious purposes. Those are typically okay. Once in a while, you're going to run into a deed restriction that's clearly illegal. It says this house can only be sold to Caucasians or something like that. Clearly, that's not legal. But even though it's not legal, some people, they buy the house, they don't they don't like that deed restriction to be attached to their deed. The good news is there's a new law this year that says you can get those. It used to be you had to go to the county recorder's office, pay a fee, and it might take a while for them to remove this unlawfully restrictive covenant. Now, no fee. They have to do it in 3 months. And anybody can do it, not just the owner of the property. The realtor on behalf of the client could go to the county recorder's office and ask to get it removed. How does this affect realtors? Well, if you are selling a house, listing side or selling side, and you happen to know, I don't think you generally know this, and you happen to know that there is a deed restriction attached, or there's something in the CC&Rs that clearly is illegal, discrimination like that, you've actually got to tell your clients, hey, did you know there's a deed restriction against your property and there's now a streamlined way to get it removed? And just go to the county recorder. Believe it or not, we actually created a new form for you. I bet this never happens to you, but if you ever happen to be in a transaction and you're aware of a restrictive covenant, either on the CC&Rs or attached to the deed, we have a library called sample legal letters. We have a sample letter where you're informing your buyer about this restrictive covenant. I think you generally aren't aware of these things anyway. That's a new thing. Okay. What else is new? I don't really want to talk about the fire hardening law. You've talked about that before, but real quickly, what's going to happen this year is CAL FIRE is going to map. Right now, they map in state fire responsibility areas. They map for very high fire zones, moderate fire zones, or no fire zone. But if you're in a local fire responsibility area, CAL FIRE just says it's very high fire or nothing. Well, starting this year, CAL FIRE is responsible for, in local fire responsibility areas, to map out high and moderate fire zones, which means more of your listings are going to come into high fire zones. Right now, remember, you provide the fire hardening form if it's in a very high fire zone, either in a state or local responsibility area, or a high fire zone in a state area, because there aren't any high fire zones in local areas. Well, next year, whenever CAL FIRE does these maps, there will be more properties in fire zones that you're required to do this form. And we're going to get the NHD form law changed so that the NHD company, right now, they don't have to disclose to you high fire zones in local fire areas because there aren't any. But we're going to get the form changed so you can rely on the NHD document to tell you whether you need to give the buyer the fire hardening and defensible space form. Hope you followed that. What about HOAs? In your handout under homeowners association, there's a new law that says HOAs have to provide notices to you by email. If you want email. Up until now, if they want to give you hard copies, they can send things by hard copies, even if you don't want hard copies. So now you can get the important documents from your HOA by email if that's your preference. All right, that's a good thing to know. Home inspectors. There's a new law you might be interested in. There's a law, right, that says whoever does your home inspection, they can't be the one to do the work, correcting the things that they called out on the home inspection. They can't charge you for that. There's now an exception for that. If it's a plumbing contractor, they can do a sewer lateral pipe inspection, and they can also do the work to fix the problem that they discover. They got to give the homeowner a disclosure form, basically saying to the homeowner, I'm the same guy who did the inspection who's going to do the work, and I'm only going to do work that was called out in the sewer lateral inspection, and you have the right to get a second opinion. Okay, so that's a slight change there. All right, housing. Let's get into housing. There are two bills I want to talk about. The most important one is SB 9. The other one is SB 10. SB 9 is sort of a big deal. SB 9 says you own a single family house in an R1 lot. It's now easier than it used to be to add another property to that, or even do a lot split and put two houses on each lot. So in other words, what used to be one house on this R1 lot can turn into 2 or 3 or 4. Sounds like a really big deal. And it is a big deal. Before I even get to that though, did you know that even before SB 9, in the last couple of years, there've been laws streamlining the process to get approval for accessory dwelling units? So in other words, forget SB 9. Before this year, before January 1st of this year, if you have a house and you want to convert your garage or back room into a unit, no hearing, no environmental impact report, they have to be approved by your city or county or your HOA if it meets the building code. Similarly, you can build a detached in-law unit, granny flat, whatever you want to call it, as long as it's no bigger than 800 square feet, 16 feet high, 4-foot setback, and they pretty much have to approve that too. So in other words, right before January 1st of this year, it's not too difficult to turn a single family house into 3 units. So this new law enables you to do it, to do one unit into 4 units. But by the way, you can't do both. So if you use SB 9 to build another unit or do a lot split and build other units, you cannot add accessory dwelling units to that. The city doesn't have to allow that. And by the way, when I say they have to allow you to do it, I mean they have to go through a process called ministerial approval. No CEQA, no environmental impact report, no hearing. If you meet the building code and safety regulations, the staff pretty much has to approve it. But you know what? There are a lot of exceptions to this. First of all, you can only take advantage of SB 9. So getting back to what I said before, so basically you can go the SB 9 route and maybe go from 1 to 2 or 3 or 4 units, or you can go the accessory dwelling unit route and go from 1 to 2 or 3. Can't do both. Okay. First of all, to take advantage of SB 9, you have to be in an urban area as defined by the US Census. So if you want to know if a lot of you might live in rural areas, you're not even considered urbanized areas, which means you can't do SB 9. So only applies to urbanized area, doesn't apply on farmland, protected habitat, conservation areas. It also doesn't apply to areas of historic properties or landmark properties. So I've noticed a lot of cities have recently been expanding their historic area or landmark area because you can't do it then. Also, very importantly, the city or county can have design standards. And basically saying, if you want to take advantage of SB 9 and build another unit, you have to meet certain requirements. You have to design it a particular way. And I've noticed a lot of cities are getting have recently passed, in response to SB 9, pretty restrictive design standards. They have to be objective and reasonable so they can be challenged. But bottom line is we're seeing that happening. Okay. On the other hand, some cities seem to be welcoming this and are even allowing SB 9 in historic districts because they can if they want to. Remember, the whole point of SB 9 is the state overriding the local, saying, even if you don't want to do this, you have to approve it. And I mentioned, for example, the state law says you don't have to do this in an historic district or something, but that doesn't mean the city cannot, if they want to, they can allow this type of new constructions, this type of development, if they want to, in a historic district. They just don't have to. Remember, SB 9 is the state taking precedence over the local. Another thing, let's say you got a single family house and you're currently renting it, or you've been renting it at some point in the last 3 years. If you want to take advantage of SB 9 and build a new one, add another property, you cannot in any way alter or demolish the existing house that's been used as a rental during the last 3 years. In other words, if it hasn't been used as a house in the last 3 years, you could tear down your existing house and build a duplex or something like that under SB 9. But if you've been renting that property for the last 3 years, you can't do that. Okay. So that's interesting. The city can require additional parking spaces, but they can't require more than one off-street parking spot per unit. And if the property is within a half-mile walk of a major transit stop, they can't even require an extra parking space for this new one. The city has to allow, they can't acquire setbacks of more than 4 feet on the back or the front, but they can require a sort of an unlimited setback in the front, as long as this doesn't result in the property owner being unable to have at least 2 800 square feet properties on the lot, which isn't very big necessarily, right? So bottom line is there's a lot of sort of hoops that the property owner has to jump through. But some of the cities, I think, are already trying to impose things that might be considered a little bit unreasonable or arbitrary, in which case they're probably going to be challenged. So this isn't over yet, as you probably know. Another issue is HOAs. What if SB 9 allows you to add another property or do a lot split, but your HOA CC&Rs prohibit lot splits or prohibit additional units? What takes precedence, SB 9 or the CC&Rs? The answer is we don't know. They're going to have to revise the law to clarify this, or there's going to be a court case. Right now, I would say, as it stands right now, the CC&Rs would take precedence. But that I guarantee you that's going to be challenged. If CC&Rs say you can't do it, and the property owner says, yes, I can, I want to do it, SB 9 allows me to do it. Another thing is this law doesn't supersede the Coastal Act. So if your property's on the coast within the jurisdiction of the Coastal Commission, remember, they still have the ultimate authority on development in these coastal areas. That's stronger than SB 9, okay? A couple more things to mention. Let's say you want to do a lot split, right? So up until now, I've been talking about you have a single family home, you want to build another one, either attached or detached. Well, what if you want to do a lot split? Can I split my lot? Yeah, you can. If you got the same rules I just mentioned, plus the property owner who wants to do the lot split, if that person owns the property on either side and they've already done a lot split on either of those properties, they can't do it on this one. Also, if the property we're talking about, the lot split in question, they want to do a lot split, if that lot itself was created by a previous lot split, they can't do it again. Basically, you only do it once. And the property owner has to commit to live as their primary residence in one of the resulting units for at least 3 years. They want to try to keep, not speculators, not developers, but people who actually live there who are going to take advantage of this, okay? And you can only do this if the lot is at least 2,400 square feet, because each resulting lot has to be at least 1,200 square feet. So an absolute minimum of 2,400 square feet. And the two lots have to be roughly equal. Neither one can be less than 40% the size of the original, okay? That is pretty much it. If you have questions, of course, we'll take them. But that's pretty much it for SB 9. It's a big deal. No one can say it's not a big deal, but I like to point out the ADU law that you didn't notice the last couple of years was also a big deal. So a lot of property owners are going to decide if they want to expand, do I want to build an ADU because I pretty much have the right to do that, or do I want to build another SB 9? I guess the advantage of building a new SB 9 unit is you can actually sell it separately, right? The advantage of, but you know what? On SB 9, if you build a new unit under SB 9, you cannot do short-term rentals on that property. You cannot Airbnb it. Whereas if you build a new accessory dwelling unit, you can do short-term rentals. Okay, interesting. So people are going to have decisions to make. Plus, of course, there's going to be the lender issue, right? I mean, I have a single-family home on a lot. I haven't paid off my mortgage, so that my lender has a lien against it. Now I want to do a lot split and build another one. But I got to get a construction loan to build the other one. Is my lender for the overall lot, are they going to be willing to subordinate? Maybe they won't. So there's going to be a lot of hoops for people to jump through. Nevertheless, it's a big deal. SB 10, the other housing law, is basically, it's not a state mandate. It's just empowering locals if they want to. If they have if there's a property that's in a transit-rich area, which is defined as within a half mile of a major bus station or train station or ferry station, or within a half mile of at least 2 bus lines that stop at least every 15 minutes during rush hour. That's a transit-rich area. If you're in a transit-rich area, SB 10 gives the city the ability to give the developer an exemption from CEQA. If they want to. This is not a state mandate. This is state empowering local governments, if they want to avoid dealing with CEQA for that. Okay, to wrap this up, so those are the big laws. A couple other, remember there are 29 laws in our handout to mention, plus the mold thing, plus the COVID thing. Is there anything else really important? If you have questions on evictions, you can ask. The bottom line on evictions is until the end of March, if you want to evict someone for non-payment of rent, you first have to apply for rental assistance, and you have to use a special 3-day notice form. On zip forms, it's the PRQ-CRP. And if you want to sue someone for back rent that they owe you, if you want to sue them before the end of March, once again, you have to apply for the rental assistance, housingiskey.com. What happens after April 1st? Hopefully this doesn't get extended. Then we're back to local rules. If you lived in LA City like I do, there are all sorts of LA restrictions on eviction and suing for rent. But hopefully that's not the case where you live. It depends on what city you're in, right? Okay. Anything else you really need to know? It's a little bit harder now for tenants and residents of HOAs to get away with saying they have an emotional support animal. Remember, if you have a no pet policy, you still have to allow tenants or buyers with emotional support animals if they have written verification that they actually are disabled and need one. And you know, a lot of people have just been abusing this, getting these certifications off of the internet. Well, now the law says to get one of these certifications from a medical provider, they must have actually have done a clinical evaluation of this person, and they must have been in a relationship with this person, you know, client relationship for at least 30 days. And on the certificate that they give, it has to state, okay, this is an emotional support animal. It's not a service dog. They don't have the rights of service dogs, and saying otherwise is a criminal offense. Maybe this will deter some people from trying to fraudulently give the landlord or the HOA some type of, fraudulent note saying that they're entitled to an emotional support animal, because now it's a criminal offense basically to do otherwise. Plus it's a criminal offense against the provider of the documentation if they don't have the relationship or haven't done an evaluation. That's maybe worth mentioning. I think I'm almost done here. Here's an interesting one. If you're a tenant in a building and you believe that your building is substandard, doesn't meet the safety code, or it has lead hazard, and you file a complaint, the city is required to do an inspection. They can't blow off the tenant. The only time they don't have to do it is if they've done an inspection in the last 180 days and they found that there's no problem. But it's kind of interesting that local governments must respond to complaints from tenants that the building is substandard. And obviously, if they find a problem, they got to tell the owner, and the owner has to fix it. Okay. Maybe people ask me, how much can I increase someone's rent nowadays? If you're under city rent control, that's your limit. If you're not under city rent control and the building is older than 15 years, so you're under California rent control, 5% plus inflation. San Diego inflation this year, 4.1, that means 9.1. Next year, we all know inflation is going to be more than that. it's probably going to be 7 or 8, but the maximum is always going to be 5% plus, maximum 10%. So if you're under the California rent control because your building is older than 15 years, you can increase the rent 9.1% this year. It'll probably be 10% next year. If your building is a single family house or it's newer than 15 years, ordinarily I'd say you can increase the rent by as much as you want. But until February 24th, we're under a nationwide COVID state of emergency. And anytime in California, you're under any type of state of emergency, you can only increase the rent by 10%. How do you like that? Here's one good news for realtors. You got your license, you had a particular last name. Then you got married or divorced. You got a new last name. So your new license, you renew your license with a new last name. Guess what? You can go back and still use your previous last name on your marketing, on your signs and everything. You can still use the name that you used to have your license on, even though your license is not currently. I think that's a good thing. Maybe the last one to mention is there's been a cleanup bill under tax, under Prop 19. Remember, if you're over 55, severely disabled, or the victim of a wildfire, you can sell your existing house, buy another one anywhere in California and take your property tax with you. You can do it 3 times. If it's a married couple, only one has to be 55. You can do the first leg before you're 55, as long as you do the second leg after 55. The law took effect April 1st, but if you did the first leg before April 1st, you did the second leg after April 1st, you can still take advantage of this. You can transfer your property tax, and you can even transfer your property tax if the new house costs more than the old house. So you bought a house a long time ago for $200,000. You've been paying property tax based on 200. Now it's worth $1 million. Sell it for $1 million, buy another one for $1 million, your property taxes don't go up 1 cent. What if I sell it for $1 million and I buy the new one for $1,030,000? As long as it's not more than 5% more than the sale price of the old one, no increase in your property tax. If you wait a year before you buy the second one, it can cost up to 10% more than the old one. What if it's more than 10%? What if property tax now is based on 200, house is worth $1 million, I sell it for $1 million and I buy one for 1.2. What's my property tax basis going to be on the new house I just bought for 1.2? It's going to be the original 200,000 plus the difference between the 1.2 purchase and the 1 million sale of the original. That's 200,000. What's 200 plus 200? 400. And that's a lot better than having a property tax basis of 1.2 million. So basically, if you're over 55 like me, severely disabled or a victim of a wildfire, you shouldn't be deterred from selling your house because you're worried about your property tax going up. Chances are it won't go up, or it won't go up that much. Okay, that is it. The other big news before I take questions is, of course, we have a new purchase contract. By the way, if any of you brokers have a big enough company, have over 100 people, you want to arrange some type of training from a C.A.R. attorney, email me govh@car.org, and we can probably arrange it for you, no cost, or the association for that matter. Remember, the big change is there's a grid on paragraph 3 where all of the points you negotiate are all in the same place. In other words, what do you negotiate in a contract? Purchase price, deposit, down payment, deadlines, closing date, removal of contingency date, who's paying for this, who's responsible for this. Up until this form, all those blanks were spread out throughout the form. Now they're all in the same place. All the 8 contingencies are right next to each other. I love that. For all these years, I've been telling realtors there are 8 buyer contingencies, and they're spread out through the contract. There's some in paragraph 1, 3, 4, 8, 10, 12, and 13. Now all the contingencies are in the same place, paragraph 3. Anyway, it's all good. If you have questions, call the hotline. Maybe we can schedule something. So Bob, I think if you have questions, I can certainly address them.
Gov, are we ready to go with questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Will the title companies or the brokerage companies have an obligation or jurisdiction to facilitate disclosure of deed restrictions and help the buyer, and I presume seller, file a sample form, or the agent or the escrow? Will they help? Or
Good question. They don't have an obligation, but they have the ability to. I mean, the actual escrow company doing the deal has to help you facilitate it if you ask them to. But let's say you're a realtor and you want to help out your client. You can go to the county court. If you discover this deed, you can go to the recorder's office and fill out the form for your client. You don't have to, but it used to be only the property owner could do this. Now others can do it for them. And the bottom line is just a form you fill out at the recorder's office to start the process, and you should get an answer in 3 months.
Can an appraiser reduce house value because the house is facing an elementary school, or can he cut the value for $50,000 in his report due to a school in the vicinity? Right.
So you're getting at the law that I referred to, which is making it clear that appraisers can't discriminate based on their appraisal can't be based on who the owners are. But the question been asked here is, can appraisers affect, what issues are appraisers allowed to take into account to affect their appraisal? And it's basically the same things as all of us, race, religion, color, skin, country of birth, age, gender, all that stuff, all those factors. They also cannot, for example, reduce the value of a property because it's next to a residential care facility. But what about if it's next to a school, just a regular old school, not a care facility? Is that something an appraiser can take into account? I guess what the issue is, some people like to be near the school because they got kids who want to go to the school. Some people don't like to be next to the school because it's, a noise issue. I think in general, and it's usually a case-by-case issue, I think appraisers probably aren't supposed to take that into account. That's not the type of issue in general that appraisers are supposed to take into account. In other words, there are clearly things they can't take into account that are listed. This isn't listed as one of the things they cannot take into account, but I think if an appraisal was challenged, of course, how are you going to prove that's why they did it? But the simple answer to your question is no. I generally don't think they can use that as a basis.
I did not write this question. And I'll ask you, and I'll try and not comment it on myself, but will you update us on the efforts by Howard Jarvis to change, or at least review and change Proposition 19?
I would if I could, but I don't know. I don't. That's not one of the things I track. In other words, when that particular group, is trying to pursue something, sometimes they come to C.A.R. and ask us for help. I suspect what you're getting at is not the part of Prop 19 that I was referring to, where you can transfer your property tax basis. They're probably referring to the part of Prop 19, which is the negative, which says when you pass on your real estate to your child or grandchild, it used to be the case that you could always transfer your primary residence and $1 million worth of other real estate to a child or grandchild, intergenerational transfer without a property tax reassessment. As you all know, I think under Prop 19 that changed that. You can now only transfer your primary residence. There's no extra $1 million worth of real estate you can transfer to your child or grandchild without any reassessment. And even the primary residence, you're limited to $1 million. So if the primary residence is worth more than $1 million, it's only the first $1 million that doesn't get reassessed. And finally, to take advantage of this, the heir that you're giving the property to has to use it as their primary residence. I suspect that's what you're getting at, that the Harvard Javits Foundation is trying to change that. And I would tell you if I knew anything about whether C.A.R. is involved in that or what C.A.R.'s position is on that. But I honestly don't know. Maybe we probably don't have a position yet or something like that. Okay. So I think C.A.R. did support, though, Prop 19. Your board of directors did support this when it happened. So maybe it's unlikely that they would support a change, but I honestly don't know. Good question.
Yeah, my rough understanding, and we've talked to John Kupal a little bit with respect to this, he's trying to bring back the parent-child exclusions pretty similar to what they were beforehand, and just retain the good parts that the C.A.R. has put in with respect to being able to move up.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'd support that if it could be done. Yeah. But like I said, I'm not the political guy. So.
There was a lot behind that, and it's a lot more complicated.
Okay.
Just make and what they negotiated and what the legislature threatened, and how they were able to sell it to be able to move from one house to another.
I'm sure it's not over. By the way, speaking of things, I bet you there's going to be an initiative challenging SB 9. You never know. I mean, everything comes up. Believe me, every year. You'd be amazed at the bills. I know Bob mentioned earlier in a different group that there's a bill proposed right now that says, you know, if you buy a rental property, you can't evict someone for 5 years. I mean, we're going to oppose that. I mean, there are all sorts of bills that come up every year trying to do bad things like sales tax on commissions and all sorts of things come up every year, reducing the mortgage interest deduction. So our guys and gals in Sacramento spend a lot of time just fighting bad things, and we're usually pretty successful. Okay.
I'm not sure that I understand what this says, but will SB 9 or TOD regulations supersede, which will supersede or work in conjunction?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they mean by TOD. You want to ask the person?
Oh, transit-oriented development. Okay.
Maybe that's a local issue. I mean, the point of SB 9 is it's telling the city, it doesn't matter what you want to do, you have to ministerially approve certain developments, with all the exceptions that I mentioned. Maybe if someone, whoever wrote that question, if you want to email me, govh@car.org, I can look into that a little deeper and figure out what it is, or we can talk or whatever.
I realize these are local, but if you have a comment, Gov, any new regulations with respect to short-term vacation rentals?
Yeah, like you said, not statewide. Well, there is actually the only new state law I didn't mention, it's in your handout, is the penalties, in other words, if someone rents out a vacation rental and then uses that to have a party they weren't authorized to do and it causes problems and damages, the criminal penalties for doing that have been increased. But as far as any statewide regulation of short-term rentals, no. As you know, as you probably know, it's a local issue. I mean, some cities up here in LA area have banned short-term rental. So like you said, it's usually regulated on the state level, on the local level. But remember what I said a little while ago under SB 9. If you use SB 9 to add a unit or two, you cannot, under state law, do rentals of less than 30 days on that. So that is a state rule. Other than that, it's usually local. And I don't know. No, I don't keep track of what's happening on the local level.
I'm not sure that you can answer these two, but let me relate it. It's dealing with brokerage. Is it true that NAR will allow listings on multiple listing services without commissions to brokers?
Once again, that's more of MLS, which I try to say I'm not the MLS expert currently. And you may have been reading about this. There may be a challenge to this, but currently, yeah, a listing has to offer compensation to the selling agent, but all they have to offer is a penny. right? It doesn't, it can be very small. But that is the current rule. You do on a listing, on a realtor MLS, and pretty much all MLSs or realtor MLSs have to offer compensation to cooperating agent, but it can be very minimal. This may change. This is one of the many MLS issues that are being talked about nationwide right now. Everything from coming soon and clear cooperation. Everything's up in the air as usual. So I don't have, but nothing has really changed yet. So I don't have any good answers.
This is probably not your area either with respect to the MLS, but I'll ask anyway, because I'm sure that if I don't, buyer's agents are being blocked from showing listings for the first few weeks of market time. What is being done to stop this abuse and allow us to bring our buyers to properties?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think the questioner is complaining about is maybe saying that people are violating the clear cooperation rules, or maybe they're taking advantage of an exemption. Truly, this is an MLS issue. You got to deal with your MLS on this issue. Now, if you think your MLS is not doing the right thing, if you think the MLS is allowing, maybe asking two things. Are you saying, is the MLS allowing things that or not requiring things that they should require, or the rule, it's just the rules that you don't like, which are both legitimate questions. But yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, if you have a specific question on your particular MLS, we actually do have an MLS lawyer here. I'm not the MLS, but the way lawyers work, we can only talk to certain people. So go to your MLS. If you're not happy with your MLS, go to your local association leadership. And your local association leadership, they're the ones who can talk to our C.A.R.'s MLS attorneys and talk about that. Just the way that the system is set up, we have the hotline attorneys like me to answer your legal questions, but we can't even if I knew the answers to everything, I can't really talk about MLS issues because that's the way our legal department is set up. It's a conflict of interest issue. I could explain it if I had a long time. Bottom line is go to your local leadership and say, I don't think this is right. And if your local leadership doesn't know the answer, I'm talking about your president or your CEO, they can call C.A.R. and then we can help them. Okay.
Gov, thanks a lot again. It was terrific as usual. We really appreciate you there. You can see that Gov's pretty common sense. As he says, call the hotline. They have people that can answer these questions. Use it. That's what you're paying your dues for. I can't recommend it enough. And they do have attorneys there that are knowledgeable in the different things. If they can't answer it, they can probably move you in a direction where you can get the answer. But some questions are just very difficult to answer. And with that, I'm going to bring up Chris Anderson for the last few minutes of remarks, and we'll be done. Thank you very much for coming today.
I'm going to leave. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, Gov. It's wonderful to have you be with us again. We just absolutely love the way you just give it to us straightforward, not candy coated. So, okay, so just a couple of notes before I wrap up the whole thing here. We added, I don't know if any of you guys would like to, but we added in the room, if you go out and go to your right, we added a new RPA class. So if you'd like to take that class, Jim Burns, qualified teacher to instruct you on that. We're more than happy to have you walk on down and take that class. It would be awesome. And they'll go over the area that Gov was talking about, which is that new little chart and how it all applies. And then also look forward to, in the future, there are quite a plethora. How many forms, Gov, are also being changed because of the RPA?
Only 91.
Yeah. So we're going to have, there's a few that are really important. Some of them were just the date on the bottom of the form, but the other ones that are very important, we're going to be having more classes for you guys to come to see how those will feather in to the new RPA. So be on the lookout for that coming through from SDAR for you guys in your email. So basically, we really appreciate you guys coming, and also that you have the interest that you have in our industry. We really appreciate the fact that you guys are professionals, that you want to learn, that you want to be the best at your game, and that you guys take this time to come at 8 o'clock in the morning and go until now. So we really do appreciate that you guys are leaders in our industry, and that you care for your client and for yourself. Also, we have the Circle of Excellence that's coming up on February 26th. That is down at the Manchester Grand Hyatt. Fabulous event. You don't have to be a winner to come. You're more than welcome just to come, even if you just want to see how it goes and how much fun it is, and to cheer on the others that did win quite a few awards. And I also would like to finally thank our title sponsor, which is Free Model. Go ahead and check out, they're out in our lobby out there. They've got a great program. Please go check it out. See if there might be something that you might want to offer to your clients that need a little help to get more money for their home. So with that, I want to thank you again for coming today. It was a wonderful day. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you.